I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show. July 1971. The National Security Advisor of the Nixon administration is a man named Henry Kissinger. He's a well-known academic, but it's an insider's well-known. He's on a visit to Pakistan. We know now the visit to Pakistan was a ruse. He headed into China, to Beijing, to set up a meeting that commenced February 21st, 1972. Nixon goes to China. I tell that fairy tale. It was a great success. Here we are 43 years later, because we're on the eve of the potential recreation of that event. This time, the president is Barack Obama, and this time, Henry Kissinger, well, I'll say that Henry Kissinger is played by Senior Counselor to the President, Valerie Jarrett. Michael Ledeen of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies joins Thaddeus McCotter. Good evening, Thaddeus. Don't you enjoy going to China and going to Tehran?
Communist China.
Yes, Communist China, Red China. Michael, good evening to you. Your genius is so rich that I want to push the audience into this imaginary event. Is Barack Obama, once the midterms are behind us, once the new Congress is seated, the 114th in January, once the Republicans, those rascals, are in charge of the apparatus, is Barack Obama ready to stun the world and go to Tehran? Good evening, Michael.
Good evening, John. Good evening, Thaddeus. He wants to. He's wanted to for a very long time. If he could have done it by now, he'd have done it by now. It's not a matter of timing it to come after an election or before an election or whatever. He's been after the Iranians to make a strategic alliance with the United States. Even before he was president, he sent not Kissinger and not Jarrett, but he sent a retired American ambassador to Tehran during the presidential campaign of 2008. And he's been sending all kinds of people to talk to Iranians, most frequently in Oman. And of late, at least, most frequently Valerie Jarrett. And he's trying to work it out. And if he can convince the Iranians to do it, he'll do it.
Thaddeus?
Michael, in your very perceptive piece on this, you pointed out that there was a commonality of interests amongst the United States and Mao's China at that period of time, 1971-72, that the strategic threat of the Soviet Union was driving them together. Is there a similar threat driving the United States and the Iranian regime together?
Well, you could argue, I guess, that the Islamic State might be a common threat, but it's not big enough to warrant an American president flying to Tehran. And I suspect that a great deal of the anti-Israel rhetoric coming out of this White House is designed to create the impression that he shares the Iranians' belief that Israel is a great menace to peace in the Middle East, and that together the United States and Iran could work it out to Israel's detriment.
The success of Kissinger sneaking into China and Richard Nixon going there is obvious in the relationship. It opened China up to the world. But Tehran is no giant. It's a small piece, a failed rogue state in the Middle East, now ripped apart. You mentioned the Islamic State, but there are other factions out there, Takfiri jihadists, ready to kill everyone in Tehran. So would there be a similar payoff, or is this what you could say on the merits looks like opera and not statesmanship?
Yeah, I think that's just right. And I think that the gains are gains for Obama, for himself personally, for his legacy, for his vision of the world, and not for the United States. Plus, I don't think that Khamenei would go for it. If he's as sick as people say, and that his death is now sometime in the next year or several months or something like that, is this the way he wants to be remembered? Selling out and making a deal with the great Satan? I don't think so. And my guess is that Obama will end up the same way that the other American presidents who thought they'd made deals with the Iranians, and that includes both Bush and Clinton, he'll get spat on. The Iranians will tell him, go away, we don't need you. I mean, from Khamenei's standpoint, he's getting everything he needs from the United States right now. Why does he have to make a deal which a lot of Iranians would not like? And in fact, in the last few days, you've seen the big portions of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards community coming out and saying America is our worst enemy. We're not going to make any deal with America. They don't like it.
Thaddeus?
Michael, I'm still trying to figure out what the president gains by going to Iran in terms of how the public perceives him, the, quote, political benefit. Now, granted, when Nixon went to China, it was a strategic coup in the minds of many, and history is judging him, now that the United States is heavily in debt to a communist nuclear-armed dictatorship that undermines our interests at every turn. But in terms of President Obama, what is he going to get out of this? I mean, is this going to just be a simple case of look at me and the rest of the world says, wow, I can't believe that dude's doing that?
Yeah, I think it is. I think, look, this is a vision he has had for a very long time. We don't know exactly where it came from. But he basically shares Iran's view of the world and America's place in the world. That is, he thinks that most of the big problems in the world are our fault. We did it. And that he's got to undo all the bad things that America has done. He's weakening America, and he's cutting back the military, and all these other things that have so many people in a turmoil going into the elections tomorrow. And he thinks that making a deal with Iran, which he talked about from the election campaign of 2008 on, would be a great triumph for him and would vindicate his whole foreign policy. That's what he thinks.
Puzzle, Michael. There is a surrogate war in the Middle East between Riyadh and Tehran. They both hire troops. They throw themselves into this battle. Syrian civil war is part of that. So's the civil war in Yemen, now tumbling towards Tehran. So if Obama entertains this, goes to Tehran, doesn't he close the door completely to the Sunnis, to Riyadh, to the kingdom, to their allies?
Yes, and he infuriates Israel. And he infuriates the Kurds. And, there are all kinds of... It's easy to see all the terrible things that could flow from this kind of deal. But I am convinced that in order to... Look, just today, headlines today, talked about his cutting back on investigations into the war crimes of Bashar Assad. All right, why is he doing that? He's doing it, I'm positive, at least in part, because Assad is the single most important person in the world to the Iranians right now. Assad must survive. And if possible, Assad must win. And for Obama to be approving this very nasty investigation into Assad would greatly annoy the Iranians and get in the way of a deal. And I'd love to know all the conversations that are going on about American hostages right now, because you can be sure the Iranians are playing that card.
That is?
Michael, you mentioned Assad. Now, as many of the listeners understand, there is a mutual defense pact, a la Molotov-Ribbentrop, between the Iranian regime and the Ba'athist regime in Syria. If the United States is complicit in allowing Assad to stay, again, how does this inure to the benefit, not of the United States, because we know that it doesn't, but how does it inure to the benefit of this president? I'm still trying to find where the political benefit to this president and his party comes from. What everyone's going to know is, at best, a small off-Broadway, bad off-Broadway production of Neville Goes to Munich.
Well, yes, but Neville thought he got peace in his time.
Right.
What Obama's going to get is, he hopes, a glorious reception in Tehran and then fly back to the adulation of a grateful nation. I don't think it would play out that way, but I think it's what he believes. And I think it's what he wants. And I think he's been passionately driving towards this all along, from the very beginning. Look, Why in the world would an American president not support the Iranian people when they rose in the streets in 2009? And the answer is because he wanted the regime to win, because he thought that he would make a deal with that regime. He agrees with that regime. I can't stress this enough. It's very hard to come to grips with this mindset of this president. But he's a man who thinks that America is responsible for most of the ills of the world, that countries like Iran are right to criticize us and right to hate us, and he wants to undo this by embracing them. It's what he said all along, and it's what he's done all along. We've had 6 years of it.
Thaddeus, I just want to recall something. You took to the floor of Congress to speak of the depredations of that regime when they murdered that young woman during the rioting. Can you cast your mind back right now to that moment? Did you puzzle about the silence of the White House about her murder and all of those crimes that were revealed in those months? There seemed to be no interest whatsoever from the National Security Council.
Well, I wasn't particularly puzzled by it as I was disgusted. It wasn't the United States that murdered Neda Sultan or Taraneh Moussavi. It was the barbers in Iran that did that. So when you think about it, John, that was the moment. That was the tipping point for that regime.
Right.
And this administration, and not alone, I mean, there weren't a whole lot of Republicans taken to the floor trying to get this revolution to succeed or trying to find ways to help it. So this was the moment when the West could watch the aspirations for liberty rising from the Iranian people themselves to get rid of this barbarous, oppressive regime, and there was nothing but mute silence that will forever castigate them at that period of time throughout the annals of history.
Michael, we'll get everything.
It's even worse. It's worse. He supported the regime.
Yes. We'll get everything, Michael. We'll get all the letters he's written to the Ayatollah. We'll get all of that in the archive, and we'll know how bad it's gotten these years.
Yes, well, the easy way is to bring down the regime and read the originals in their archives, because a lot of the stuff's going to be locked up here for a long time.
Do you think they're holding that against him, Michael? He'll do what they say, or they'll release his letters beseeching peace?
No, they think they've got him anyway. He'll do whatever they ask him to do anyway. They know that. That's why they don't have to make a deal with him. They've got him. They're convinced that they've got him right where they want him.
Michael Ledeen.
He won't do anything mean to them or to us.
Michael Ledeen of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thaddeus McCotter of WJR. February 21st to 28th, 1972 changed history. This February, are we going to see it again? I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.